The Battle of Little Bighorn was a moment in history that shocked American society in the late 19th century. How could a superior military power be completely decimated by Native Americans with bows and arrows? That was what the Americans at that time couldn't believe. But the real story goes much deeper than that. The first Native American tribes such as the Cheyenne, Crow, Kiowa, and Arapaho arrived at the Black Hills in modern-day South Dakota and Wyoming in 1500 AD. In the late 1700s, the Lakota, aka the Sioux, came over from Minnesota and drove other tribes west as they claimed the area known as the Black Hills. They came into contact with Europeans and Americans over the years who were trading for furs in the region. The Lakota were a main supply of furs in the region and showed the white man how to trap. Eventually, the fur traders got better at trapping and they didn't need the Lakota for furs anymore. The white man continued to encroach on Lakota territory, and eventually the Treaty of Fort Laramie was signed in 1868. The treaty established the Great Sioux Reservation. The borders of the reservation ended at the entire western border of South Dakota and at the northern Dakota border and Nebraska border all the way to the Missouri River. Areas extended into present-day Nebraska and partly over the Missouri River. The treaty gave authority to the US government to decide the laws on the land. White men and Indians were both punished if they broke the law on the reservation. They would be charged through the US, not through tribal courts. The law also forbade all white men except US officials to trespass on Indian reservations. The treaty was signed by 156 Sioux and 25 Arapaho by the chiefs and prominent members. But peace did not last long, after rumors of gold being in the Black Hills led to miners and settlers creeping closer to the Sioux land. As a result of this, Cheyenne and Lakota started taking land to the west from smaller Indian tribes who were aligned with American settlers. The Crow tribe, who had a treaty in the area and put up resistance to the Lakota, called for military actions from the US against Indian intruders. The Lakota continued to raid Crow and Araki tribes. In 1874, the US sent the 7th Cavalry Regiment on an expedition into the Black Hills, led by Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer. They set off for modern-day Bismarck, North Dakota, which was Fort Abraham Lincoln, into the Lakota territory. They left on July 2nd, 1874. The mission was to look for a place suitable for a fort, find a route to the southwest, and investigate the rumors of gold in the Black Hills. They were 1,200 strong, had 110 wagons, and numerous horses and cattle. They had artillery and food supplies for 2 months. The 7th Cav also traveled with native scouts led by Bloody Knife and Lean Bear. A few previous expeditions into the Black Hills were never heard from again, so little was known from the area. Custer's lead commander of the Engineering Corps, Captain Hardy, who had heard of the Black Hills before and had them marked on his map. Custer entered the hills from the north, traveling south at 45 miles a day. On July 31st, they reached Black Elk Peak. Custer and Lido took 3 men to climb the peak. The rest of the 7th Cav and civilian miners camped at the miners' base, which they named Custer Park. Later, the majority of the men stayed at the camp, and Custer took a small unit to look for a place for a fort to be later built. They reached a point 8.5 miles away and named it Agnes Park. They had some peaceful encounters with Indians. On August the 7th, Custer shot and killed a grizzly bear. Till his death, he said that this was his greatest achievement ever as a hunter. While Custer was off naming peaks and killing grizzly bears, the civilian miners were at camp prospecting for gold in the area. It is unknown how much gold really was found, but a diary from William McKay reads, "In the evening, I took a pan, pick and shovel. I went out prospecting. The first panful was taken from gravel and sand from the creek bed, and on washing, was found to contain from 1.5 to 2 cents, which was the first gold found in the Black Hills. On August 1st, we tested the soil at French Creek, and it was estimated a miner could make $150 per day mining in the Black Hills." Custer's regiment returned to Fort Abraham Lincoln on August 30th. The amount of gold found was unknown, but the fact that gold was found triggered a gold rush to the area. This violated the Fort Laramie Treaty, and eventually thousands of miners flooded the Black Hills. The army struggled to keep the miners out. In 1875, Sioux delegations headed to Washington, D.C. to persuade President Ulysses S. Grant to honor the existing treaties and stop the flow of miners into their territory. They met with the Secretary of the Interior and the Commissioner of Indian Affairs. The U.S. leader offered $25,000 for the land and wanted them to relocate to Indian Territory in present-day Oklahoma. They refused. Although the chiefs were unsuccessful in D.C., they didn't join Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull in the warfare that later followed. After this meeting, a U.S. commission was sent to each Indian agency in the Lakota reservation and tried to gain support from the people to pressure the chiefs into signing the new treaty. This attempt failed. The Lakota were growing resentments over the expanding U.S. investments into the Lakota land. One thing was the proposed Northern Pacific Railroad, which would cross over the Great Buffalo hunting grounds. After failed diplomatic ventures, President Ulysses S. Grant met with his army generals to figure out what to do about the dispute. They were going to stop evicting trespassers, to let miners flood the land, and discussed initiating military action against the Lakota and Northern Cheyenne. The Indian inspector Aaron C. Watkins supported this option and wrote, "The true policy in my judgment is to send troops against them in the winter, the sooner the better, and whip them into subjection." Word was sent to the Lakota and Sioux to return to reservation by January 31st, 1876, or face military action. The deadline passed with no words from the natives. On February 8, 1876, General Sheridan telegraphed General Crook and Terry, ordering them to commence their winter campaigns against the hostiles, starting the Great Sioux War of 1876 to 1877. Stay tuned for the next part of the video, where I'll explain more about the Great Sioux War in general and the Battle of the Little Bighorn specific, using detailed map animation of the battlefield. So don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell to be notified about the next part. Thank you for watching.